Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 7 of Anything But Football. And after a tumultuous week with some cancellations and some big time losses, we have some great news to talk about with two huge wins. We'll start it off with Matt because Matt actually got to see the first win in person, as I was just talking about before we started recording. Matt, what were your impressions of seeing Ohio State live in person at in Piscataway in the rack? What did you think?
Yeah, the rack was pretty fun to be at. Not many people were there, so it was pretty quiet. It was kind of felt weird because I've been to multiple games at the rack, especially Ohio State games, and it's like sold out. There's Todd Frazier's down low, like getting the fans hyped. The students, I mean, the Rutgers students are pretty energetic for what Rutgers athletics is. But Ohio State 79 to 68, 1 point away from making it the same score last time that they won in Columbus, which was 80 to 68. But overall, the Buckeyes played pretty well. I mean, just looking at the box score immediately, four of the five starters were in double figures. So, I mean, it was a pretty impressive game all around. EJ Liddell kind of took off in the first half. It felt like for the Buckeyes, he kind of lifted a weight off the shoulders of the offense, especially because they weren't really gaining momentum. They weren't really gaining much until EJ starts hitting some of his mid-range shots. And you could just see on the sidelines that the Buckeyes started feeling it. That started giving Duane some momentum. That started giving Justin Arns some momentum. Started giving Justice Suing. And then Kyle honestly played well down low. This is one of Kyle's more impressive games I got to see. But I think the biggest takeaway was CJ Walker. That was his first game out with the torn ligaments in his right hand. So that was Jimmy Sotos' time to start and step in for the injured Walker. We got to see Sotos. He started the Buckeyes off their first run. In this was a game of runs, as Coach Holman said, and as Kyle Young said in the post-game press conference, that they want to be a more aggressive team. And that's what they kind of instilled in the beginning with Jimmy hitting two big threes, and that kind of lifted Ohio State's on a 6-0 run. That kind of turned to a 10-0 run, and then Rutgers went on their run, and then went back and forth. But overall, I thought the Buckeyes, this was one of their better team wins of the year. They played well offensively, defensively, and we also got to see a little Meechie Johnson, which we'll talk about soon, but was impressed with what Meechie did. It's not easy coming into a Big Ten game, especially against a number 15 at the time, Rutgers, and being able to be the point guard for Ohio State. And and he only came with 2 days of practice. So it was also pretty impressive. But overall, I thought the Buckeyes looked pretty good. And you said you listened on the radio. What did I mean, you're looking at the box score, I'm sure. So what are your takes from that?
Yeah, we've talked about it all year, and huge win over a team in New Jersey over Rutgers, is a top 25 team. And you mentioned the two names already that you knew Ohio State was going to have big games from in order for them to actually come out on top and have big wins. And that was Duane going for another 17, 4 for 8 from three. So the efficiency's there, 6 or 14 for the field. So again, the efficiency was there. We'll talk about it when we actually get sort of to more towards the record, towards the Northwestern game because the stats were there. One assist, four turnovers. Like you said, Jimmy was the guy running point, and Jimmy was good. Four assists, one turnover. So they sort of flip flop. Um, but I think you said it right when you say Meechie Johnson was sort of like the story you follow here, because not only did Meechie Johnson get his first action, Meechie Johnson got thrown into the fire of going Jacob Young, Geo Baker, and then turn around going Boo Booey against Northwestern. So it's good to see a guy that I got to see a little bit this summer, get to know a little bit better, Meechie. And we'll, like I said, it's another thing we'll talk about once we get to the Northwestern game because that's the one I saw more, and that's the one where Meechie actually got his first attempt, first basket, and Meechie was the guy that was going to come out and play fast, play hard, and take shots. And he knocked a few down against Northwestern. But really, um, Ron Harper, Jacob Young, those are the guys. Even Geo Baker, to hold Geo Baker to 4 points is huge. To do that in New Jersey, to go to New Jersey, hold Geo Baker to 4 points, and Ron Harper Jr. only had 11. So still, if you play Rutgers and you're holding and Jacob Young's their top scorer coming out of the game, either Jacob Young went off or you had a really good game defensively, and I think that's what you're looking at to hold a team like Rutgers in New Jersey to 68 points and have Jacob Young lead the way is everything I imagine Chris Holtman would have expected. And to obviously to win the turnover battle, which is something Ohio State's probably focused on a lot. That's another huge win. In Ohio State's overall, it just looked like the shooting percentages and everything looked a lot better. 40% from three, 50% from the whole field. So that was a huge win. A lot of good things coming out of that Rutgers win that they needed badly, really, to stay afloat and stay where they wanted to be in the Big Ten Conference. Moving on, this past in the middle of the week, we had obviously the Northwestern game. Um, I don't know. The big storyline I'm going to go with here, the one that was interesting, is to see Meechie come on and really with Jimmy out, with CJ Walker out, Duane Washington can play point, but I think Meechie and Duane are sort of a little bit the same kind of guy when it talks about you're talking about a scoring point guard that is going to be able to put the ball in the basket. We saw it from Duane going for his career high for 23. We also saw Meechie go 2 for 3, 2 for 2 from 3-point line in that game, add on 6 points. I think you'll see a lot of similarities in their game for the coming years when it comes to Meechie and Duane. But to just see those two sort of supplement the point guard play against another team in Northwestern that had Boo Buie and to hold him to 5 points is huge. Matt, what were your overall takeaways from Northwestern before we get too deep into it?
You mentioned one of the storylines was Meechie. Obviously, got to see the future point guard for the Buckeyes. I thought the biggest storyline for me was this is a revenge game in a way for the Buckeyes. They lost by 1 point last time Northwestern. And that entire game, they kind of felt like it was theirs to win. Like they were in control the entire time back in Evanston. It was a really tight game. Buckeyes took some runs, and then Northwestern got back into it. And then literally last seconds, Boo Buie won Northwestern the game. And so I think the Buckeyes just knew that this game meant more now, that they need to beat Northwestern. I mean, the first half they looked they were pretty impressive. I think we got to see it, especially Duane. And I thought also Justin Ahrens looked great. I've not been the biggest Justin Ahrens fan. All these episodes, I just talk about his little fake. And then the Big Ten Network, of course, they had to add the statistic in that before the Northwestern game, Justin Ahrens took, I believe it was 2 shots that were not 3-pointers this year. The rest were 3 points. I think it was like 45 3-point attempts, and 2 were just regular field goals, not 3-point attempts. I was like, that's insane. Like, that's not normal. But anyways, again, 4 of the 5 starters got in double figures for Ohio State. Overall, Coach Holman said that this is the best looking team, the best looking win that they've had all year. He's very proud of them, the way they stuck together. They did, unfortunately, it got really tight. I would say around the 6-minute mark of the second half. It was around that time. And then I think it was like it was a 1-point game, actually. I remember Deej hit a big 3. And then that just kind of stunned Ohio State for a second. But I guess Coach Holman was like, guys, like, come on, like, we got this. We've been playing well all game. This is not going to be something that we can just let slip away from our hands. Overall, I think what's most impressed me about this 2-game run that Ohio State's had versus Northwestern and versus Rutgers is that the starters have been playing really well. That's what's impressed me the most. We have not seen much of the bench, really. It's been disappointing me that we haven't seen much of Musa Jallow. I really am a big fan of Musa just because of his pure athleticism. He has been somebody that I think Buckeyes can rely on the team to just go out there and just be a contributor more, especially now that CJ's gone, that he can be there. He can be that guy who's passing the ball around more, who's getting scrappy on the floor, who's getting up for alley-oops. He can do everything, and that's what I really want. Is that he's been kind of quiet, I think, just now that we're seeing more Seth Towns play. And I think also more, and EJ is also back now. EJ had his mono, so that's when Zedke stepped up, I guess. So I guess I'm hoping to see when the bench players come in, when we see Zed, when we see Eugene, Seth, Meechie, and Musa, a little more production potentially, because in the Northwestern game, the bench combined for 14 points. So take it as you will. That's not that many I like to see at least 20 from the bench. But anyways, I thought overall great effort. So Ohio State, and just looking at the shooting percentage, they shot 50% again from the field. 3-point shooting, 40%. Duane did shoot 3 for 11, so I think cooling back on the threes a little for Duane might have to happen in the future, just production-wise and efficiency. But overall, the Buckeyes I thought looked pretty good. And I just want to know, because you mentioned you Meechie sort of, you got to see him in high school. Like, what should Buckeye fans know about him from a personal standpoint, like getting to know him over these years?
Meechie's very energetic. His whole family's that way. Meechie's a very brash kid. He's gonna play his game, and he's been reeled in a little bit, especially playing with the Indy Heat in the Nike EYBL circuit. That they sort of helped refine the little parts of his game that make him more of a point guard instead of a scoring guard. And like I said earlier, I think a lot of things you see from Duane are the things you're going to see from Meechie. I think you're going to see a guy that can handle the ball, play well, get some assists, probably a little bit better of a passer and a ball handler than Duane. but he's going to be that guy that's still looking for a shot and can knock down, and he's capable of going for 20 points like Duane did against Northwestern. I really think you're seeing a lot of the same things from Duane, from Meechie that you've seen from Duane these past few years, and it's going to be that same way probably the rest of this year and next year as we sort of move on. And really, you look at Meechie Johnson probably taking that point guard role, maybe even next year. One thing I do think we have to mention, we talked about the shot attempts from Duane wasn't very good. Obviously, I mean, him and Justin Orange are going to be the guys that take 3-point shot attempts. But other than that, I think we have to mention his 6 assists to 1 turnover ratio. That's very good. That's when you thrust a guy like Duane into the point guard role, and to see him have that output of 6 assists to 1 turnover is huge.
Also a career high in the assist category for Duane, so that was impressive.
Yeah, because nobody else had above 2 assists. I mean, the big thing was overcoming EJ having a bad game. EJ's sort of been on a little roller coaster recently coming back, but Duane stepped up. Duane made shots. You said Justin made shots. Justice made shots. All around team effort, and I can see why Holtman's saying it's the most proud he's been in his team all year. You mentioned 2 bench players that I think we're going to probably talk a little bit about as we get into this next game against Illinois, because I mean, when you talk about Illinois, the 2 guys you got to talk about are Kofi Coburn and Ayo Dosunmu. Musa Jallo, I think, is a great guy off the bench that we might see get some extra minutes guarding a guy like Ayo Dosunmu. I think Musa has the athleticism, the foot speed, really the experience. Because one thing we have to forget is Kyle and Musa were the only 2 guys that are left on this roster that came in with Coach Holman's first recruiting class. Musa's a very experienced. I think he's going to be a guy that knows how to defend good guards in the Big Ten. So I think we might see him step up in minutes against Ayo Dosunmu. Zed Key is a guy you got to mention off the bench because Kofi Coburn is a huge guy, 7 foot, 280 pounds. The Buckeyes, I imagine, are going to try and throw a lot at him. Sort of whatever didn't work against Liam Robbins against Minnesota is probably how the Buckeyes are going to try and change and reverse and go that way against Kofi Coburn. But I mean, you have to have a far better defensive performance against Kofi Coburn than you had against Liam Robbins, or you're looking at the same result and fall in back to 500 in the Big Ten play, which is not where you would hope to be. Illinois did just lose to Maryland, so that's one. I don't know if you're getting a team that's sort of dragging right now, or if you're going to get a team that's sort of coming off a hot streak. Either way, it's one of the best teams in the country. They have a chance to be in the Final Four, but Ohio State is a win that Ohio State sort of needs to try and get if they can. The toughest part really is going to be defending those 2 guys, but also having to do it in Champaign, big time game, noon on Saturday. Matt, what are you sort of watching if the Buckeyes are going to be able to pull out this win against Illinois?
Well, you mentioned the Maryland game, and just looking at the box score currently, Kofi and Ayo Dosunmu, 21 and 23. They were the main scorers. 2 starters had 0 for Illinois. And, I mean, if the Buckeyes are able to get that team that got to play against Maryland, then I think the Buckeyes will be happy with the result. And talking about defensively, you mentioned about Kofi Cockburn and playing against him. He's a big dude. He's averaging at the moment 17 points. Ayo's averaging 22. Those aren't stats that the Buckeyes get to see every day in playing against. They got to see a Ron Harper who's averaging 24, who's one of the leading scorers in the country, and they held him to 11. So I'm thinking to myself, if the Buckeyes are able to play defensively like they've been playing the last 2 games, yes, they've been playing smaller teams and haven't had the issues with the front court like they're going to have potentially with Illinois, then I think that the result can go in the right way for Ohio State. But the main thing for Ohio State is going to be defensive rebounding. That's what they excelled in against Rutgers. They didn't let up any offensive rebounds pretty much. And that's what saved them from losing this game, in my opinion. Just you got to see them crashing the boards every time. EJ was a threat. Duane even got some rebounds. Justin Arns was getting in there. Kyle Young. So I think, if they're crashing 4 to 5 every time, this could be a result that could be pretty decent for Ohio State. It's just going to be a matter of, can they be consistent with that, especially on the defense, just calling out their rotations, doing everything they need to do. Because we have seen games where they've lucked out. You mentioned the Minnesota game. Liam Robbins is a perfect example. And then they're going to also face Purdue right after Illinois on Tuesday. And Purdue, they had an issue with Travion Williams down low in the paint. So I think just going against these physical, athletic, big centers and big front courts in general, that Ohio State's going to have to consistently play hard. And that's just going to be the key to the game, especially for success, is being able to consistently make sure that they're commanding, they're being the more aggressive team out there. And that's what Kyle Young said, that they want to be the more aggressive team every game. And the reason why they've lost so far is because they weren't the more aggressive team. And I mean, just a little fun fact that Ohio State so far, all their Big Ten losses have come on the road. Might be a little bit troubling of a fact to hear out loud because they are going on the road, haven't played in Champaign in 4 years, which is shocking. So hopefully the Buckeyes, I mean, no fans might not affect them, but I mean, hopefully the Buckeyes come out with the W, because this could be a nice 3-game win streak that the Ohio State can put together and then maybe get a revenge game against Purdue. That's 4 games right there. And then they're 8-3 in the conference. That could be a rest. Oh, no, not 8-3. Excuse me. 6-3 in the conference. That sounds more like it, but that could be a nice recipe for a nice little Buckeyes run right there. But I'm just thinking to myself, this is the Andre Curbelo, Zed Key high school teammates clash that we're going to get to see.
Well.
Apologies. Just remembering now from high school that these two are playing together. And Andre Curbelo's played for pretty well this year for a freshman who's gone in there and who's had to start a couple games. He's averaging around 9 points and 3 rebounds, 5 assists, I would say. And I think he's played pretty well. But I just think Ohio State defensively, do you think defense is going to be their key or offense? Because I'm trying to wrap my head around which one's going to be harder, but I really want to say defense is going to be the big thing they need to do.
Yeah, I think defense is going to be the big key here. And like you mentioned, rebounds. You can't give guys like Sumu, and then you mentioned Andre Curbelo, another freshman, Adam Miller, who's from Chicago, that is a deadly 3-point shooter, and even Trent Frazier. You can't give guys like that extra possessions because they're going to be able to capitalize on them. They're a very high-flying offensive team. So if they're going to make their shots, they're going to put up their points, but limiting extra possessions for a team like Illinois is going to be huge. And also, I think watching how Kyle and EJ and even Zed, and I doubt Ibrahima, but those 3 guys try and handle a guy like Kofi Coburn is going to be interesting. Because one thing is, Liam Rollins to me seems a little bit taller and a little bit lengthier than a guy like Kofi Coburn. Kofi Coburn is a brick wall, and I think Kyle's a little more better matched, and even EJ, to take on a guy like Kofi Coburn. But we'll just have to see. Defense, I think, is going to be the key, because obviously you're going to need a great performance again from Duane on a guy like Trent Frazier. You're going to need another good performance from Justice or Musa on a guy like Sumu. And then all 3 of those bigs are just going to need to put it together to not only stop Kofi Coburn, but when they rotate to the bench, Georges Spajanishvili is another talented Big Ten player that was a starter and like one of the better bigs in the Big Ten up until Kofi Coburn walked into Champaign and just became a brick wall. Other than that, like you mentioned, the Purdue game after that's going to be huge. I don't know the full extent of their schedule. Purdue, Wisconsin is a tough one to try and take on a Saturday afternoon in Madison. It's good that you get Purdue at home before you go to Madison after playing in Champaign. We're really starting to get into the meat of the schedule because you like Illinois, Purdue, Wisconsin, Michigan State, Iowa. The list goes on and on, and then you follow up against Maryland. It's a very rough stretch, and they showed it, I think, when they were talking about Northwestern schedule on the Big Ten Network. I can't remember their schedule off the top of my head. I believe it was something along the lines of Ohio State, 2 other powerhouses.
Michigan State was somewhere there.
Michigan State. It was maybe like I think it was an Iowa was in there as well. Just that's what you're going to get. You're going to get these 4 or 5 game sections in the Big Ten where you got to try and at least come out 500, if not a little bit better, or else it's really going to sink you in the Big Ten. Other than that, obviously, I don't know what all the other Big Ten schedule is. Iowa, Michigan are off to amazing starts, so it's going to be hard to, and they have talented bigs as well. Wisconsin's a team that we haven't really talked a ton about, but they got my former Ohio State player and transfer Micah Potter is another talented big. So Kyle Young, EJ Liddell, Zed Key, you're going to have to strap up and really get ready, starting with Kofi Coburn, because it's going to be a war in the paint these next few games.
I think no Penn State kind of hurt Ohio State in a way, just because Penn State's on, I guess we can all consider they're on the lower of the totem pole for the Big Ten. At the moment of talent, I think you could put them with Nebraska up there, maybe a little higher than Nebraska. No disrespect to Penn State, but no Pat Chambers anymore, so new head coach. lost some talent to the league. But overall, I think what we're gonna see is either we're gonna have a successful run these next few games, or it's gonna go downhill. In my opinion, I just don't know. I think it's gonna be hard for Ohio State to go 500 just because I don't know which game they're gonna be able to take home. I think maybe that Purdue game they're gonna be able to take home, but Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan State, all that right there is just that's potential disaster because I've been able to watch all those teams this year and they're all fantastic, especially Iowa with Luka Garza. That is a team you don't want to mess with when it comes to March, in my opinion. I think Wisconsin's just overall very lanky and very athletic. Micah Potter has played pretty solid this year. And then Michigan State's Michigan State every year. So you're going to get Michigan State's not had the best year, but Michigan State at the end of the day, still Michigan State, and they still have Tom Izzo as one of the greatest coaches in college basketball. So should be interesting. But any news in the recruiting world for basketball or wrestling? What's going on, Mick?
Yeah, we'll probably have to bring another scoop contributor, Brennan Dotson, on who does a little bit more with wrestling. Come talk about some of the wrestle offs and the upcoming duels and stuff. Not much going on. Wrestle offs. I think there was a few upsets. A good chunk of it went scratch when it comes to who won and who didn't. Other than that, there's not recruiting's pretty silent right now. Ohio State, when you're in the meat of the Big Ten schedule, Ohio State coaches have their head down, grinding, trying to get wins. Whether that's Holman or the assistants. Not much going on with the current committed guys. I know Malachi's doing very well. Kalen and Malachi both hit the 1,000-point mark for the high school career this year. So hats off to them. Big honor for a high school guy. Yeah, there we go. Matt tipped the cap. I'm not exactly sure how Bowen's doing. I think Roddy Gale is still transitioning to life over at his prep school in Utah. I can't say the name, so I won't even try. And then I believe, I think it was rivals.com. So we'll mention it. I think Bruce Thornton got a huge bump and bumped up to top 15 5-star prospect.
Yeah, I got tagged in that video as well on Twitter. Did you get tagged in that?
I don't think I did, but he's been on a tear down there in Georgia. And I mean, he's playing for one of the better public school teams in the country at Milton, and he's tearing it up. So
yeah, I was tagged in some random Twitter post for Bruce, and I was like, who is this dude? And some Rivals member, I was like, oh, this is weird. And it's like Adam Jardy, and I don't know, it was so odd just to see. But yeah, I mean, I watched Bruce, and Bruce is interesting to me. I don't really know much about the recruiting world as much as you do. Obviously, it's your expertise, and that's why you're an insider with the scoop. But what is Bruce's game? Because I can't tell. He looks kind of small, but he looks really buff. So I'm just trying to figure out what Bruce is like more.
I think, and it's not the stiffest competition because I think you give the nod to CJ when it comes to it, but I think Bruce is definitely he is. He's one of the highest rated guys that Chris Holman's ever in position to sign, and he's probably the best point guard Chris Holman's gonna have during his time at Ohio State. And that's no knock on CJ Jackson. I believe I can't remember the name. I think that was it. CJ Walker, guys like that. Keyshawn Woods. It's just this is what I think Coach Holman's been trying to get throughout his whole 10 years to get a point guard that he can rely on like he should be able to with Bruce. And I think you're going to see a lot of success between that group and that pairing because Bruce isn't really like you mentioned. He's not like a 6'4" lengthy point guard. He's a guy that's probably going to be probably 2-3 year guy, maybe even a 4-year guy at Ohio State and have a lot of success. Plays on one of the better, like I said, one of the better public school, high school teams, and plays on a very talented team for the Nike EYBL circuit. He's a leader. He's going to be the highest rated recruit, and he's probably one of the leaders of this class. I hope to eventually get down and see him, but overall, I think he's just a bulldog of a point guard that's able to get to the rim and knock down shots. I think that's something that people probably don't mention enough about him is he can put the ball in the basket, regardless of where you have him on the court. He's just very talented. I'm interested to see what Bruce is when I see him live. Same with Roddy. I saw Bowen. I'm trying to pull up Bowen's stats right now, and I think he's still off to pretty solid start in one of the better basketball conferences in the in the Cincinnati area. One thing with Bowen is if you try and look at his stats right now, his teams are very limited due to COVID outbreaks and quarantining and stuff. So take all his stats with a grain of salt. Regardless, thank you guys for joining in for another episode of Anything But Football. That is my co-host, Matt Goldman. Make sure you read all Matt's stuff. Listen for his check out his Twitter. What's the handle, Matt?
At Matt_Goldman 28.
Because Matt always has the press conferences with Holtman, always has different nuggets, updates from the game and stuff on there. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Anything But Football.